across the globe. I am here live with my show Talkative, and on today's session, I'm going to present a very interesting personality who is globally renowned for her research, for her blogging, for her treatment, for her training, for her teaching. Uh, and she is a proud founder of Cornerstone Preschool and Aloha Autism. Yes, she's none other than Dr. Jennifer Distow. Jennifer, welcome to my show and good evening to you as you are in New Zealand.
Thank you for having me. I'm very, very grateful to be here.
I'm also fortunate that I'm hosting a personality like you. So coming straight to the topic,
Okay.
that there are a lot of misconceptions, blurry conceptions, misunderstanding, whatever you can say, regarding autism or autism spectrum disorder or ADHD or all the disorders in this periphery. So first, I want to make a clear vision from your viewpoint that what actually autism is.
Okay, so for me, autism is a brain processing. There is a lot of different definitions that are out there, and it does fall under a mental health area. For me, in my approach, when I'm working with families and with the different children and also adults under the spectrum, I see it as a brain processing. And my approach and my behavioral plans, as well as the teams that I build around that, are all based on the premise or the idea that it is a brain processing limitation, is sort of how I see it.
Is there any chance of using the term malfunctioning?
Some people do. Some people do. In regards to that, I tend to be a little bit more positive because I think our language really influences our on our approach. And I'm a person that tends to see the glass as half full rather than half empty. So the language that I choose to use with these families and these children tend to be a little bit more proactive, more positive. So I don't tend to look at it as a malfunction. I see it as more of skills that are needed or brain connections that need to occur. So I see it more as a learning. And with doing that, there's no, I don't stop. So if I see it as a malfunction or as a damage, then I'm going to, when we hit tough times with the children and the families, I don't want to throw my hands up and say, oh, that's the best we can do. And so by looking at it more as a brain processing, then I can go ahead and say, well, we've hit a wall, so we need to regroup and we need to problem solve. We need to come at this another way. Let's involve the child more. Let's see, because a lot of times the child, even though they may not be the best communicator, they will give us indicators because they try to help us. And we're just not very good translators with that. So that's kind of my more approach. I know everyone approaches it so differently, and it has to do with your own style. So that's kind of my style. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Now, my second question for some deeper understanding that according to you or your research or your views, what are the possible causes that create this such kind of disorder, which is apparently not fully curable?
Okay, so there could be a lot of reasons. So the reason why autism is a very difficult behavior or a brain processing is because it can be very different between each child. And what's the best way of answering this? Ask me the question again. I'm sorry. I got lost in my thoughts. I started going down a rabbit hole and I sort of forgot. I'm so sorry.
It's nothing like that. There is no such complication in my question. I just want to dive in deeper understanding that according to your wisdom, what should be the possible causes that create such kind of disorder that is not fully curable?
Right. See that part, nobody really knows. The one thing that we do know is that the brain isn't communicating on both sides. So one of the things that that when a family comes to me to begin with and they have a young child, the first thing I start to get them to do is to start doing exercises that do midline exercises so that it starts crossing the middle of the body. So it starts to get the brain to communicate. So you have the lack of communication on both sides of the brain. And then the other thing you have is sensitivity. These children are so sensitive to their environment, to food, to noises. And so think of it this way. You're sitting down to do your work and you're concentrating and someone turns on the stereo super loud. It's very difficult for you to concentrate. And it's very difficult for you to do your job, right? And then you get frustrated. That's kind of like how it is for these children. But their triggers are different than ours. So for them to sit down and try to do something, let's say, for example, one of the common things I have is when a child's trying to communicate, they'll try to say, let's say, for example, they're trying to say the word dog, but then the word cat comes out. And so they get frustrated because they're trying to please. And when they see that they're not pleasing us, they become more frustrated. And then when that happens for so long, they just would keep withdrawing. They keep doing this because they keep seeing as their inability to connect, their inability to be part of our system. And so one of the first things I do is I start getting them to start doing midline exercises. The next thing is we have to take a look at their diet, because with their diet, they could be eating something that they could get drunk off of. Do you know how, like, if you had a stiff drink, you're kind of like, oh, I'm so relaxed. Well, with some of these children, the way the food gets broken down in their system gives them the same effect as if they've just had a shot of alcohol. And so you're not taking in messages when you're really relaxed and your brain is fuzzy. Well, it's the same thing for them. But it would be like a common food that you and I would eat, and we wouldn't think about their sensitivity to it. So we have that. So we have the brain communicating. We have foods that are not being processed and broken down in their bodies that are impacting their ability to communicate and to engage in the world around them. And then the other part that we have is they have such a level of intelligence, but we can't access it because of all their behaviors. We can't access it because of all of their inability to fill out like a test like the rest of us would. I had this one little fellow that I worked with. He was about 3, nonverbal, wouldn't talk, and he would observe everything. And so he would constantly take our finger and he'd point to us to say the words. And he'd lean forward and he'd listen and then he didn't want to hear it anymore. Then he'd go to something else and he'd point his finger and he'd want us to tell him and he'd listen. And then at about the age of 5, he just started talking. So what we did in the meantime is we kept with the midline exercises, we kept with the diet, we kept with a behavior plan that worked with the family, how to establish routines, how to deal with inconsistency. There was a lot along with that. But he just started talking and he started articulating. So what we learned was when he was taking our finger and pointing and we were saying it, he was taking that in. And for us, we weren't quite sure because we can surmise what someone is doing, but unless we're inside their head, we really can't say 100% that's what's going on with that person. We know we can look at patterns and everything else and we can say this could be what's going on. So that's kind of the approach and also the areas that I kind of look at. But they have, so back to this young little fellow, when we'd sit him down, the normal testings that happen with children and that, he would tantrum, he would refuse to hold the pencil, he refused to crayons, any of that stuff. He didn't want to do any of it. When we went to a tape recorder and had him answer it, he answered them all correctly. But it was finding the modality that they wanted to communicate in. For the school that we were working with, they couldn't accept that, he wasn't writing and things like that because he had to learn to write. And that was all part of the curriculum to be able to measure it, right? And that's how they apply the grades and things like that, because we have a basic bench line of expectations. But he did great with the tape recorder. I had finished up with a child when he was about 6, and he was still on the avenue of using a tape recorder to answer it. And we got him into a school that would accept that. But it's accessing that intelligence.
Well, your experience in this field, so far as the practical examinations and practical applications are concerned, it's like a mammoth. Mm. You are just referring.
Oh no, you're so kind. You're so kind.
You were just referring a case of a kid of 3 years, and you treated him up till 6 years, where you find that he's quite a brilliant so far as intellect is concerned. He's very attentive. He can answer almost 100% correct. Now, I want to ask you one thing, that let's take a kid of 8 or 9 years old. He is also autistic from birth with hyperactive disorder. He's very much hyperactive. He's non-verbal, or sometimes he utters something which is not comprehensible by others. Everything is fine, but can you throw some light on this, that how long it will take to bring that kid into some kind of normal living, as the age is already on the upper side, like 8 or 9?
Right. Okay. So just so you know, because we're talking in general. So what I want to make sure is that someone doesn't take this and say, oh, I applied this, why didn't it work? Because, I'm speaking in general terms, because each of us are unusual, and we have our own little quirkiness that you need to meet the person to make sure that it's a good match, the idea.
Yes.
If I had a family with a child that came to me and they were about 8 or 9, nonverbal, one of the things that I would want to start doing is figuring out some form of communication, because the child will have communication already. It'll be either grunting or pointing. There will be some form of communication. So I would probably look at doing something that like sign language. I would want to implement something like that, because when we're not understood, we get frustrated and it hurts our feelings. For these children, it's no
Exactly.
different. So I would want to put into something like some kind of sign language so that the communication starts opening up. The other thing, because the child's really hyper, and if it's a boy, he needs a lot of physical activity. So I would put him into something like running. I would put, because he's not going to be very good at team sports because of the lack of communication. And, you know, if you put him into something like soccer, he's just going to want to take the ball and goal, and the team's not going to like that. So it's not going to be successful. But something like, or depending on the family and what they have in their, around them, like even jumping on a trampoline, there's riding a bicycle, there's many different things, but we've got to get that energy out. We've got to get that energy going, because right now, because it's being bottled and he's probably holding on to it like this, and then he bursts. And so, and that's when you start having behaviors. That's when parents get really frustrated, because it usually happens in the most inappropriate time. And so usually the parents are embarrassed, you know, because it's happening publicly, and then the kid tries to control it again, and then it bursts forward, right? So that's where I would want to go ahead, and I would want to do some kind of an exercise program that's daily, that would help focus that energy. So that would be one thing. So I would look at sign language for the family unit, because everyone needs to be connected. Everyone needs to talk in whatever way it is. If sign language doesn't work, I would look at having some kind of an iPad where they can type in, because there's autocorrect and things like that. There's lots of different ways, but the first thing I want to do is open up communication, because a lot of misunderstanding is happening in that family unit, and a lot of hurt feelings are happening in that unit. And when a family's operating on hurt, their vibration's lower, and so their experiences and what they pull towards them is not harmonious. So, you know, we need to get them into that vein. We need to get them into that area. So sign language, physical activity. I would also look at his diet to see what's happening in his diet, because one of the other things that we do, whether we mean to or not, we like to treat children, and we like to treat them with candy, and we like to treat them with nice foods, right? Because if we like them, we want to share them. And so to look at his diet and see if that's also causing something as well.
Okay.
I would also put something in for the parents, because the parents need some kind of timeout. They need some time to regroup. They need some time for them as a couple, because they're on overload. So if the child is at 9, so they've been through 9 years of trying to figure this out. So I would want to get some kind of help for them as well, so that they could talk between them, so they can build their relationship. And then, because children are plugged into their parents, so we need to make their foundation strong. Because I won't be staying with this child. My job is just to tweak things and give it to them, because it's their child. So did that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a very much prominent sense to me also, because I didn't have any clear idea about this kind of treatment. But one thing I'm noticing that in every sort of procedure, you are focusing on diet. I also want to ask you this question, that whether this diet is a very important part of treatment of autistic kids or not, and if yes, then what sort of diet would you prescribe in general?
Oh, in general, okay. So the reason why diet's so important, you know, if you have a racing car and you put regular fuel in it, it sputs. It's not going to go anywhere, right?
Yeah, it can't race with general fuel. You are using a very beautiful metaphor like racing car, but it's something flashed in my mind that oh, a hyperactive kid is like a racing car.
So it's
That's where your expertise. That's where your expertise is.
You're very kind. So
Well, carry on, please.
So for the diet, I wouldn't, I've been in the field for a long time. My expertise is behavioral. So I set up behavioral plans. So I would call in an expert that would be a nutritionist, because I'd be careful, because even if I've seen this done with another child, it's not my level of expertise. So I would consult with a nutritionist, because a nutritionist will do certain tests. They'll do, sometimes they do blood work, sometimes they do glucose testing and stuff like that. There's a lot of different things that they can do to really pinpoint a good diet for them. For me, I would probably just recommend more vegetables, less sugar. But even at the same time, certain vegetables are higher in sugar, depending on when you eat them and things like that. So I would really outsource it to a nutritionist, because they would do a better. It's like if I went to the gas station with my race car, right? I would outsource what fuel I needed, because I could guess, and then we'd still get sputtering, and we may not get the best that we possibly can. But if I go to someone that's an expert in the fuel, in this case, the fuel would be food, then we're going to get quicker results.
Now, coming to the next point, and that is late learning. If every kid who has the tendency of learning something late, be it crawling, be it uttering words, be it memorizing some names, whatever. Is there any chance of getting autistic for every kid? I believe there are some normal kids who are late in learning.
You ask good questions. You ask very good questions.
I have a devil's brain. I have a devil's brain.
Okay, so it would really depend on the child. It would really depend on what's occurring with the child. If there's, let's say, for example, I have, maybe a better way to answer this. Let's say, for example, I'm teaching a child how to brush their teeth. And so that's the outcome, is being able to brush their teeth independently. So I would assess the child to begin with. What if their hand motor skill isn't strong enough to hold the toothbrush? So to just focus on them brushing the teeth, they're going to fail all the time because they can't hold the toothbrush. So I would have to do an assessment of their hand strength. I'd have to take an assessment of their hand and eye coordination before we could start there. So let's say, for example, the parent's been brushing the child's teeth all along the way. So we need to get it independent. So I would start them with squeezing a tennis ball to build the strength in their hand. So we haven't even got to brushing the teeth yet. We're just getting them ready. So that means we need to figure out when that is. And so as they're getting their hand stronger, then we're going to be just placing the toothbrush in their hand and the right angle in which to hold it. And that's all we'll do. We'll still have the parent brush their teeth. And eventually we work up to when the child has it there and has the strength to move it up and down and the different strokes. But there may be lots of steps in there depending on what the child's need is. And so typically developing kids go through different stages. Like you said, they go through they do the rolling over in the crib. Then they do the pushing up. Then they get into crawling. Then they get into walking. Let's say, for example, a typically developing child, they get all the way to the stage, but they're not able to stand up and they're having problems standing up. And if they came to me in regards and they're worried about their child being autistic, one of the first things I'd have them go and do is go to a medical doctor and have their ears checked to make sure there's nothing wrong with the equilibrium in your ears. Because see, that's where we need to do a lot of intake before we start running down a path thinking we've got the answer. We need to take a look at, because sometimes this could be an inner ear. I had one child I was working with, he was under the spectrum, and every time the parents would turn him to look at them to talk, right? And the kid would go ballistic. The kid would attack them, bite them. And so when I was doing my assessment, my original intake assessment, I noticed he wasn't looking at my eyes when I was talking to him, which is kind of normal, but he wasn't even aware of me until I started getting closer to him. And then it was kind of like, he was like, oh. So I had them go to the medical doctor. They had his ears checked. He had a bacteria in his ears from swimming in the ocean. And he had lost 80% of hearing on one side and 60 on the other. And it was from the bacteria that was still going on. So they got him on antibiotics. They did a bunch of other stuff. And then they got hearing aids. So he could hear, but the problem that happened after that, because you solve one problem, it opens the door for several more. The noise was too much for him now, because he went from not hearing much at all to all of a sudden, all the sounds were like this. So he was constantly taking his hearing aids out because it was too much. But his language jumped dramatically because it was a hearing thing. So he wasn't hearing what was spoken to him. So therefore, the way he was speaking was how he was thinking he was hearing. And it turned out to be an ear infection that he had had they estimated it for at least 2 years. So.
Now, the attention part. Autistic kids are normally seen like they are not paying attention to any important things, which we general people believe it's important. But they are very much attentive to something of their interest area. Is there any kind of lapse in brain functioning or reasoning or something else?
I'm not sure. Could you ask me the question again? Maybe a different way? I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Sorry.
It's concerned about the attention of an autistic kid. They are not very much focused on normal things, which we general people generally concentrate on.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain things in which autistic kids are very, very concentrated. They concentrate very deeply on those things, but they are not concentrating on other things. Is it a malfunctioning in brain, or is it their reasoning difficulty, or is it something else behind this kind of behavior?
Once again, a very loaded question you have asked.
So I'm using brush fire, I'm keeping you on a firing squad and using brush fire.
Okay, so a lot of us have our own interests that we have as well. So when we were children, we had things that we were very interested in, and we wanted to do those things a lot more than other activities. But our brain said, oh, no, we have to put this on hold and we have to go do other stuff. A child with autism, remember, their communication isn't the strongest that's happening. And so when they're doing something that they call a preferred activity, they are going to want to do that more. And let's say, for example, if I'm watching the screen over here. This is popping up, and it says, absolutely very loaded question. I've just lost my train of thought.
You have total liberty to unload it with your comfortable time. So don't make haste.
Okay, so as when a child is 2 years old, You know, they call it the terrible twos because they understand their power of wanting to do a preferred activity. And when they don't get that preferred activity, they drop to the ground, they scream, they tantrum. A child within the spectrum stays in that stage longer because of the inability for communication. In a typically developing kid, we can take that child and move them through the terrible twos so they learn to have unpreferred activities coupled with their preferred ones, right? So they learn. And because they're able to read body language, they're able to take messages, and they're able to respond to those messages. In a child in the spectrum that has difficulty with the brain processing from the left to the right hemisphere, they're not taking those messages in. So they're not developing out of that 2-year-old mentality of this is what I want and this is what I will only do. And
Okay.
as you start opening up the communication and having appropriate consequences and rewards, the child will move along. But that's where it's sort of like, the best way I can describe it is when I get a child with autism or in the spectrum, they're like a ball of string, and it's got lots of knots in it, and it's all wound up. So as we start to pull it out slowly, we're going to deal with different knots. We're going to deal with different things. And sometimes we have to stop and figure out and untangle something before we can take more of the string off. And there is a lot more limitations that are happening with that, because the child under the spectrum is still having all the behaviors as another child is. They're just experiencing it differently. Did that make sense? Did I answer the question?
You have unloaded.
You are so gracious and so kind.
Now, the next firing. In general conception, it's being presumed that autistic kids have very narrow range of interests, be it 3 years old, be it 5 years old, be it 10 years old, whatever it may be. They have very narrow range of interests. What other people, what attracts other people may not attract them to that level. But they have certain interests in every life. And all the kids, including autistic kids also, they have some kind of intense interest into some kind of activities. It may be one activity, it may be multiple activities. So my question is, as say a particular kid who has intense interest in block building, so should that be incorporated into his treatment procedure?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I worked with a little girl, and she loved fish. Every kind of fish there was. She loved fish. And so what we did to get her moving in a direction is everything that we did included fish of some type. And it motivated her more. It's the same way it would motivate us. Like, we have preferred things that we like, that we would like to go and do, whether it's reading, swimming, or running. There's just so many different things that we like to do. And whenever we have that opportunity, we go do that because it brings us joy. So if we can take something that brings a child enormous joy and start including it in things that they don't like doing, they're going to be more open to doing it.
And and as long as this openness will continue, we can apply some kind of different processes also which can attract his interest.
Can you ask me that one more time? I'm sorry. You broke up. You went and your voice froze.
If this kind of openness will help his treatment, so by this process, we can incorporate some other area of interest also into this treatment that can attract his interest or his attention or something like that.
Well, what I would do is I would.
Actually, one autistic kid is basically unifocal. Whatever he or she likes to do, he continues to work with that. He continues that activity at random or without any break. But what you are saying that there will be some kind of openness, there will be some possibility of openness in that kid's mind. If that is true or if that is feasible, we can allow or we can apply some more area of interest into that, or that will be heavier for that kid.
Well, first of all, it will depend on the child because everything is subject to the child and their stress level and how much stress that they can endure, right? So that's going to be premised with my answer here. I could go back to the example of the little girl with the fish. We wanted to teach her about family and community and things like that. So we did it through fish in the ocean and talking about, like, not taking her into the ocean, but getting books on it and videos. And so that she could take the concept of fish, which she loved, and apply that concept to other aspects. One of the biggest things for children with autism is they don't take social cues like we do. So we engage and we participate in group thinking, and we don't seek isolation. We don't seek to be alone. I mean, the COVID thing is a prime example, is because mental health has gone way up because people have been isolated. So children with autism, they were ahead of the learning curve because they're fine with isolation. They're okay with their own company, right? And so
they are very much comfortable with isolation.
Right, and so if we were to compare, so if we look at COVID, and we were looking at our adapting skills to COVID,
yes,
we fail. When we look at kids with autism and they're adapting to COVID, they're excelling. So it's the application of their skill set, and unfortunately, us on this side of the other side of what the spectrum is, we tend to judge what is important and what isn't in so many different ways. And not until our worlds are turned around do we change that. And the prime example is COVID. And so, as I said, you look at children with autism, their families are struggling because of the being at home and everything else. But a lot of my clients, like a lot of the children, are quite happy. They're quite content because they're not being forced to go to school. They're not forced to be doing all these unpreferred activities. So did that make sense?
They can easily relate to the matters of their choices. Now, the next important firing, like bombing, it's like explosion. That the most important role to play to nurture and nourish an autistic kid is family members and caregivers. they have the most important role to play. Apart from therapists, apart from medical doctors, apart from dietitian, apart from the kid itself. So, so what will be your suggestion for family members, for first degree contacts, and for caregivers? Be the kid is of 3-year-olds or 10-year-old, whatever.
So what would be my advice to them?
Yes, your advice is highly solicited. So please.
That's okay. The first thing that I always, whenever I'm building a team for a child, the first thing that I always say to the team, find something that you like about this child, because you're finding tons of stuff that you don't like. And whatever you're focusing on is what you're growing. So try to find something that you like about this child. Find something that's redeemable. And I've worked with teams and they've said, I haven't got anything. So I said, breathing. Can you go ahead and be happy that they're breathing? Could you agree? So
to be very frank, that be happy that they are alive.
yes, and that they have a role to play. They have a reason for being, just like we have a reason for being. And it just so happens that we're fumbling our way along, trying to figure out the combination to connect with them. That doesn't mean that they fail. It means that we are failing. And so kindness goes a long ways. I always say kindness is important for everyone, for the child, for the family members, for the service providers, and that. If you need to take a moment, you need to take a breath.
You need to say empathetic behavior.
Pardon me?
You mean to say empathetic behavior. It's not sympathetic. It's empathetic behavior which will full of kindness.
I'm not sure what you're saying. I'm sorry.
You are talking about kindness. Kindness will go a long way. That's what I want to summarize in one sentence. That be it family member or be it caregiver, one must have attitude is empathy.
Yeah. No, I have to, because if you think about it, like with you and I talking, you and I've just met each other for the first time.
Yeah.
I really like you. I think that you're a very amazing man, and I think that you do a lot of
My
really good
pleasure.
things.
My pleasure. A big bow to you.
But see, you see the dialogue that we're having because we like each other. And because we like each other, there's a natural kindness and there's a natural wanting the other person to do well. And that's no different with a child with autism. That's no different with the family members who are probably exhausted.
Yes.
They need that kindness. It's taking that moment. We spend so much time trying to come up with answers and to fix things that sometimes just taking a moment and being with that person and caring is so powerful and kind.
Well, now coming to your contribution to society, my dear friends, Dr. Jennifer had launched an app for autistic kids and their guardians almost a year back when you first launched that app.
Oh, I've got two apps. I've got one that's called...
No, right now you have something newer version. But when you first time launched the app, it's almost a year back when you informed me that this is the link of that app and something like that. And that version, so if I am not very wrong in my memory, that version costed less than $1 to register.
Right. Well, I have.
And now you have launched a newer version of it, which is with artificial intelligence and free for all developing countries like India, Bangladesh, or something like that.
Right.
That's a very big development. But my dear friends, it's still for iPhone users only. She is
Yes,
trying her
we're
level
working
best
on we're
to
working on it.
to convert it on Android version also. Very soon it will be available for Android version, and as soon as it will be available, I am here to shout out for this.
Thank you. Yes, we're the
My pleasure.
because it's artificial intelligence with the Android, it has a lot more variations. So it's taking us longer to make sure that it's working perfectly. And so what we've decided to do, myself and my team, is the app is if you're in England or Canada or US or New Zealand or Australia, you pay for the app. And the people that pay for that app there help subsidize so that it's free in India, Bangladesh, Africa, Sri Lanka, and I think there's a few other countries that is free, and it will always remain free. But yes, we're working on the Android. Apple and Android are very interesting apps because you have to launch an Apple first before you do Android.
Definitely.
Politics.
Very soon, I'm strongly hoping that very soon I'll get that good news that you have developed that Android app, and I'll be the first man in India to make a test run on that app with some of my clients.
I would
Because I'm
love
not
that. I would love that.
because I'm not that type of specialist in this spectrum. But with the help of artificial intelligence, I believe I can do some positive things for all those people who are suffering with their kids, or that kids who are suffering from this inborn diseases. Uh, so, before summing up all these things and all this lovely conversation from you, I just want to have a final note from sorry, from your end, that again on that question, that what should the family members and caregivers of an autistic kid do?
Oh, not give up.
Don't give
Not
up.
give up.
This is something like a common statement that we usually use, but I want something specialized from that special person.
Special person. What is it that that's a tough question because when I walk into a room, and if I'm building a team or I'm assessing a team and I'm tweaking it and turning, making it so it works better, the first thing I do is I listen. I listen to what everyone's saying because the answers are there in the room. The answers are with the child and how to reach them. The answers are there. And so it's listen. And it's listen to hear specific messages and to understand what those messages are that I'm hearing. One of the things that I do with families, if it's an older child with autism, I get them trauma support for the family. And the reason why I get the family trauma support for the parents and the other siblings is because they've been traumatized. And when I get that trauma therapy for them, it helps them problem solve what's going on because they have all these emotions that they've just sided. Like for siblings, they don't get the attention because so much of the attention goes on the child under the spectrum. So they learn to be without, and there's resentment with that. Then you have the couple, the mother and the father, or the parents. What you have with them is you have guilt, and you have this frustration and this feeling of failure. and the inability to connect with one of their childs, which is so damaging to their soul. So that trauma training or that trauma intervention helps them express those feelings, to understand what they're feeling. If it's service providers, like their team, and they're frustrated and I've been called in to assist, they're feeling stupid. They're individuals that have been to school for many years, and they've been with many clients and they haven't gotten any results. So they're feeling bad. And so even if I come up with some possible ways to deal with this, their feelings are hurt. And it's not just their feelings are hurt. They feel bad. They're like, why didn't I see that? That seems so simple. Why didn't I see that? And it's because they're burning out. They're putting in so much time, they're putting in so much effort that they're burning out. And it doesn't mean that they don't care and that they're not super smart and they're not really great at what they do. They just need a refresh button. For the school providers, like in the school and things like that, helping create a way in which the teachers can communicate with the child means that they can connect with them. So they're not going to ignore them in the classroom, and they're not going to see them as something annoying that's going to be disruptive to their class, and that they can embrace the child and they can include them because they know how to. So a lot of it is translating. So what I do is I go into the room and I help translate what's happening in that room. And at the same time, as I mentioned, kindness and respect, because everyone's doing the best that they can in that moment, and having respect for that. And one of the things that I do with teams when I work with them, I always get them to check in with themselves. And the way I explain it to them is, if you see people in a distance dropping and they're falling to the ground, and you rush in too, you're going to drop to the ground. So you need to take care of you. So if you see people dropping down over there, you need to put your oxygen mask on. So what I do with the teams is I say, in the morning when you start, at lunchtime, and before you go home, I want you to check in with who you are and where you're at and what you're feeling. And when I first started doing this, the team would go, oh, no, it's about the child. Oh, no, it's about the parents. Oh, no. And I had to keep telling them the story. I need you. I need what you can do. And right now that means needing you means that you need to take care of you so that you're full, and that, that will flow over. Because the other way, that's where burnout happens. And we've all been there. If you've been in the trenches, you've been burnt out a few times.
Exactly. I want to assure you that there will be no more firing from my side.
No, I'm good with it. I'm really good with it. These are really good questions. These are really, really good questions that need to be asked.
That's what I want to do on behalf of all my audiences from all platforms. Actually, our time zone difference compelled me to arrange this live show at this point of time at 11 a.m. Which is terribly busy schedule for everyone. Schools, colleges, offices, everywhere. Even housewives are also busy with their all kind of household works. So I'm talking while talking with you. I'm planning to retelecast it again in the evening so that our messages can reach the maximum number of people. So that they can get benefit, a minimum percentage of benefit maybe, but they can get some kind of benefit from this conversation, from your wisdom.
Our wisdom.
So, Okay, our wisdom. It's a
Our
collaborative effect.
wisdom.
Our wisdom. By the way, I want to inform you one thing that I have sent you a friend request to Facebook also. So if you are on
Oh,
Facebook actively, please accept that so that we can collaborate on broader spectrum. Mm, and I'm done from my part. Before signing off from this live show, it's your turn. Mic is with you. If you want to convey some kind of message from your part to all our audiences, please.
oh, I think the only message that I'd like to share is to remind people to take a breath. And I remind myself to do it all the time. To take a breath, and in that breath, know that that's where life is, because we get so mixed up in everything that's happening in our lives and happening to us is we forget to breathe, or we don't breathe deep enough. And if you think about it, without air, we're not participating in this life. It's the one thing we need is air. We need to take a breath. And that oversees everything else. And then when you take that breath and you get to be in this place called life, and it's bumpy and it's messy, be kind. Be kind to yourself. And then the rest just finds its way. That's my only message. And thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this.
It's my honor to have you on my stage, um, because whatever you are doing for society, whatever you are doing for mankind, uh, if I could do 5 or 6% of this for our society, I would have considered myself as the luckiest and bravest on this earth. So
Well,
no word is enough. No word is enough to praise your endeavors or your wisdom and take my bow.
I feel the same way, because wisdom is shared and wisdom happens together.
Yes,
The wisdom that
wisdom
I
is
have
something
is for us.
which will increase after sharing. Wisdom is something when you will share, your wisdom will increase. It will not decrease like bucks or money or something like that.
Yes.
So with this note, with this kind message, uh, on behalf of Dr. Dastu and me, we are signing off from this live show. Though our personal chat will continue, our personal planning will continue. Still, for all the spectators across the globe, throughout all the platforms, uh, a good day and goodbye.
Goodbye.